The transport shuttle hummed beneath my boots as it descended through the layers of Xylos 7's atmosphere. I'd been on enough planetary landings to recognize the shift in pressure, the way the artificial gravity fought against the planet's natural pull, creating that strange floating sensation in my stomach that never quite went away no matter how many times I experienced it. Through the viewport, I could see the Academy's main complex rising from the crimson landscape like a monument to everything humanity had achieved since we'd clawed our way off Earth. Massive spires of reinforced durasteel and transparent aluminum stretched toward the orange-tinted sky, their surfaces gleaming with the kind of pristine cleanliness that only came from automated maintenance drones working around the clock. I was 18 years old, fresh out of basic training, and about to start my first real assignment as a cadet in the Interstellar Defense Corps. The name sounded impressive, I'd give them that. The reality was probably going to be a lot of data entry, equipment maintenance, and standing guard duty in corridors that looked exactly like every other corridor in the galaxy. The shuttle's landing struts extended with a hydraulic hiss that vibrated through the floor. Outside, the landing pad was a massive circle of burnished metal, surrounded by floodlights that cut through the perpetual twilight of this sector of the planet. The sun was a distant orange coin hanging low on the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch forever. "Welcome to Xylos 7 Academy," the automated voice announced through the shuttle's speakers. "Please gather your personal belongings and proceed to the main reception area for assignment processing. Remember to present your identification chip at all security checkpoints. Unauthorized personnel will be." I tuned out the rest. I'd heard variations of this speech 100 times during training. The universe was full of rules, and most of them existed to remind you that someone, somewhere, had decided you weren't important enough to break them. The ramp lowered with a groan of hydraulics, and I stepped out into the alien atmosphere. It was breathable, barely. The air had a metallic tang to it, like licking a battery, and the gravity was about 15% heavier than Earth standard. My muscles would adapt in a few days, but for now, every step felt like wading through shallow water. The reception area was a cavernous space filled with the controlled chaos of new arrivals. Cadets from a dozen different systems milled about in their various uniforms, their species ranging from the insectoid Cathari to the amphibious Meridians. The air was thick with the mingled scents of alien pheromones, cleaning chemicals, and the particular smell of nervous anticipation that seemed to be a universal constant. I made my way to the human processing station, where a bored-looking lieutenant with tired eyes and a regulation haircut scanned my identification chip without bothering to look up from his screen. "Jackson Marcus," he read aloud, his voice flat. "Terran Confederacy. Previous assignment, Training Battalion 7, Mars Orbital Station. Specialization, Security Operations." "That's me, sir." He finally looked up, studying me with the kind of clinical detachment that suggested he'd processed about 500 cadets today and was running on caffeine and spite. "You've been assigned to Gamma Section. Quarters 47B report to Senior Instructor Vex at 600 tomorrow for orientation. Do you have any questions?" "Just one, sir. Where can I get something to eat? The rations on the shuttle were—" I paused, searching for the right word. "Educational." The lieutenant's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. A hint of shared human experience, maybe. "Mess hall is on level 3. Follow the green markers. The food isn't great, but it's better than shuttle rations." "That's not saying much, sir." "No," he agreed. "It's really not." Dismissed, cadet. I found my quarters without much difficulty. The academy was laid out with the kind of ruthless efficiency that only military engineers could achieve, all right angles and standardized dimensions. Quarters 47B turned out to be a small room with a bunk, a desk, a storage locker, and a view screen that was currently displaying a generic image of a mountain range from some planet I didn't recognize. My roommate hadn't arrived yet, so I claimed the lower bunk and started unpacking my duffel. It didn't take long. The contents were minimal: spare uniforms, toiletries, a datapad loaded with training manuals, and a small holoframe showing my family back on Earth. I set the holoframe on the desk, positioning it just so. My mother's face smiled back at me, frozen in a moment of happiness. My father stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, looking proud. My younger sister was making a face at the camera, her tongue sticking out in that way that had always made me laugh. I missed them. That was the simple truth of it. I missed the smell of my mother's cooking, the sound of my father's laugh, the chaos of family dinners that always ended with someone arguing about something trivial and everyone forgetting what they were arguing about 5 minutes later. But this was what I'd signed up for. This was the path I'd chosen. The Interstellar Defense Corps didn't care about your feelings, and neither did the universe. I was about to close my locker when I noticed something strange. A small device was attached to the inside of the door, partially hidden behind a maintenance panel. It was about the size of my thumb, dark and smooth, with no visible markings or seams. I'd been trained to notice things that didn't belong. Every soldier in the Corps went through the same security protocols, the same endless drills designed to make us paranoid enough to survive in a universe that was, at best, indifferent to our existence. But this didn't look like any surveillance device I'd ever seen. It was too small, too simple. No lights, no sensors, no visible power source. Just a smooth, dark capsule that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I reached out to touch it, then stopped myself. Standard procedure: don't touch unknown objects. Report them to your superior officer and let the experts handle it. I closed the locker and made a mental note to mention it during orientation tomorrow. Then I headed for the mess hall, because I was 18 years old and my stomach didn't care about mysterious devices or standard procedures. The mess hall was exactly what I'd expected. Long rows of tables, a food dispenser that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated the concept of food, and the low murmur of conversation from cadets trying to make small talk with people they just met. I grabbed a tray and approached the dispenser, studying the options with the careful attention of a soldier evaluating a tactical situation. The food was presented in uniform cubes, each one a different color that supposedly corresponded to a different flavor profile. The reality was that they all tasted vaguely of cardboard with varying degrees of disappointment. I selected a green cube, a yellow cube, and a blue cube, then found an empty table in the corner where I could eat in peace. That's when I first saw her. She was sitting at the table next to mine, surrounded by a group of cadets who were hanging on her every word. She was human, or at least human-looking, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to shift color in the light. Her uniform was standard issue, but she wore it with a kind of casual confidence that suggested she'd been in the Corps for a while. "I'm telling you," she was saying, her voice carrying across the space between our tables, "the Cathari are planning something. I've seen the way their scouts have been moving along the border. It's not just routine patrols." One of her companions, a heavy-set man with a scar across his jaw, shook his head. "That's just conspiracy theory. The Cathari have been our allies for 50 years. They're not going to." "Allies?" the woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Cathari don't have allies. They have temporary advantages. When the balance shifts, they'll shift with it. It's what they do." She caught me watching and raised an eyebrow. "You knew, Cadet?" "Yes, ma'am, just arrived today." "First day and already spying on your fellow cadets. You'll go far in this outfit." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Name's Tanaka. Lieutenant Tanaka if you want to be formal about it, but since we're going to be working together, you can call me Rika." "Jackson Marcus. Cadet Jackson technically, but—" "Marcus." She said my name like she was testing it out. "Good, solid name. You look like a Marcus. The kind of person who follows orders without asking too many questions. Sometimes I ask questions. Sometimes, she seemed amused by that. Well, we'll work on it. What's your specialization? Security operations, ma'am. I mean Rika. Security ops, she nodded slowly. That's good. We need people who can keep their eyes open. The Academy's been getting a lot of attention lately, and not the good kind. What kind of attention? She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. You know about the Xylos project? I shook my head. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. There were a lot of projects in the Corps, most of them with names that sounded more impressive than they actually were. Xylos was the first planet we colonized outside the solar system, she explained. We thought we were alone out here. We thought the galaxy was ours for the taking. Then we found out we were wrong. The Cathari, I said, trying to follow the logic. The Cathari were just the first. After them came the Meridians, the Veth, the Zorn, and about a dozen other species we'd never even imagined. And every single one of them had one thing in common. They'd all encountered the same thing we had, something that didn't want us here. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean? I mean there's something out there in the dark, Cadet Jackson. Something ancient. Something that's been watching us since the first human stepped off Earth and looked up at the stars. And it doesn't like what it sees. The lights in the mess hall flickered for just a moment. A brief dimming that I almost didn't notice, except that everyone around me seemed to notice it at the same time. Conversation paused, heads turned, and for a second the entire room was united in a collective moment of unease. Then the lights came back to normal, and everyone went back to their meals like nothing had happened. But Rika was watching me with a knowing look. You felt that, didn't you? The way the energy in the room changed. I'm not sure what I felt. Sure you did. Everyone felt it, but most people will pretend they didn't. She pushed back her chair and stood up. Come on, I want to show you something. Show me what? Just follow me, Cadet, and try to keep up. She led me out of the mess hall and through a series of corridors that seemed to twist and turn without any logical pattern. The Academy was like a maze, designed to confuse anyone who didn't know the layout intimately. After about 10 minutes of walking, I was thoroughly lost. Where are we going? I asked. To see the view. We emerged onto an observation deck that overlooked the entire facility. From here, I could see the full extent of the Academy's sprawl, a complex of buildings and landing pads and training grounds that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Beyond the Academy walls, the crimson landscape of Xylos 7 rolled out toward the horizon, broken only by the occasional mountain range or river canyon. Beautiful, isn't it? Rika said, leaning against the railing. This planet's been through a lot. You can see it in the rocks, the way they're shaped. This used to be an ocean world, you know. Billions of years ago, the entire surface was covered in water. Then something happened. Something that drained the oceans and left this wasteland behind. What happened? Rika shrugged. No one knows for sure. The geological record is incomplete, but there are theories. Some people think it was a war. Others think it was something more deliberate. Something that happened before any of the current species evolved. She turned to face me, her eyes catching the light in a way that made them look almost silver. That's why they built the Academy here, Marcus, because of what's underneath us, what's buried deep in the planet's crust. What's buried there? The Xylos archive. She said the words like they meant something, like they carried weight. An ancient repository of knowledge. The Cathari found it first, but they couldn't access it. The Meridians tried, couldn't access it. The Veth, the Zorn, all of them tried and failed. But there's something about humans that lets us get in. You're saying we're special. I'm saying we're different. There's something in our minds, something in the way we think, that makes us compatible with the archive systems. The other species have tried everything to figure out why, and none of them have been able to explain it. It's like our brains are wired differently. I thought about that for a moment. It sounded like the kind of thing people say to make you feel important, to give you a sense of purpose when you're just another cog in the military machine. So what's in the archive? I asked. Rika smiled. Information. Lots of it. The Xylos project is about understanding what came before us, understanding the history of the galaxy and the species that inhabited it. It's about making sure we don't make the same mistakes that they did. And what mistakes were those? She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, an alarm began to sound throughout the facility. The warning siren was loud and piercing, the kind of sound that cut through even the thickest concentration and demanded immediate attention. Rika's expression changed instantly. Gone was the casual confidence, replaced by something harder and more focused. She pulled a communicator from her pocket and spoke into it in rapid, clipped sentences. Central Command, this is Lieutenant Tanaka. I'm on observation deck 7 with Cadet Jackson. What's the situation? The voice that came back was strained. We're picking up unusual energy readings in Sector Gamma 4, possibly an incursion. Alert status has been raised to Beta. All personnel are to report to their designated stations. Rika swore under her breath. Gamma 4 is where the Xylos archive entrance is located. They're going after it. Who's they? She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. No time for questions, Cadet. I need you to stay close and follow my orders exactly. This isn't a drill, and I don't have time to explain everything. We ran through the corridors, past startled cadets and barking officers, toward a section of the academy I hadn't even known existed. The architecture changed as we moved deeper into the facility. Gone were the clean lines and efficient design of the upper levels, replaced by something older, rougher. The walls here were made of a dark, volcanic stone that seemed to pulse with a faint inner glow. Keep your eyes open and your mouth shut, Rika instructed. Whatever happens, don't make any sudden movements. The energy signatures here are unstable, and the last thing we need is to trigger some ancient defense mechanism. We reached a massive door made of a metal I didn't recognize. It was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when I tried to look at them directly. The effect was disorienting, like trying to read a book in a dream. Rika placed her hand on a panel beside the door, and the surface rippled at her touch. A moment later, the door began to open with a grinding sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Beyond it was a chamber that took my breath away. The room was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadow, and the walls were covered in the same shifting symbols I'd seen on the door. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal holding a glowing orb of pure energy, pulsing with a rhythm that almost matched my heartbeat. "What is this place?" I whispered. "The heart of the archive," Rika said. "This is where the ancient knowledge is stored, and this is what the others have been trying to access for centuries." She moved toward the pedestal, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. I followed hesitantly, feeling like an intruder in a place I had no right to be. "The Cathari tried to brute force their way in," Rika continued. "The Meridians tried to use their biological abilities to interface with the system. The Veth used their advanced technology. None of it worked. The archive has its own defenses, and it doesn't respond to force. So how do you get in?" "We don't. The archive chooses who to let in. Or rather, it chooses who to let access its knowledge. That's the part we don't understand completely. It's like the system has a mind of its own, a consciousness that decides who's worthy." "Of what?" The room seemed to grow colder as I spoke, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the air. The glowing orb on the pedestal began to pulse more rapidly, and the symbols on the walls started to move and shift in patterns that made my head hurt. Rika noticed too. "Something's happening," she said, her voice tight with tension. "The archive is responding to something, to someone." She turned to look at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. fear. Marcus, what are you thinking about right now? I'm thinking about, I paused. I wasn't sure what I was thinking about. My mind felt fuzzy, like I was trying to recall a dream that was slipping away from me. I'm thinking about my family, my mother, my father, my sister. I'm thinking about how much I miss them. The orb began to glow brighter, and the temperature in the room dropped even further. I could hear a faint buzzing sound, like 1,000 bees flying in perfect formation. Your family, Rika repeated. You're thinking about your family, is that all? No, I'm also thinking about. The words were hard to form. I'm thinking about what you said, about the archive, about the Xylos project. I'm wondering why we're here in this place, what we're supposed to do. The buzzing grew louder, and the symbols on the walls began to spin faster. The orb of light in the center of the chamber was now so bright I could barely look at it. Rika grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. The archive is responding to your thoughts, Marcus. It's accessing your mind. The other species tried everything, but they never understood that the key was something simpler, more human. More human. You weren't trying to control it or force it. You were just thinking, being yourself. That's what the archive responds to: authenticity, honesty. The buzzing stopped, and the light from the orb faded back to its normal pulsing rhythm. The temperature in the room began to rise, and I could feel the tension draining out of me. What just happened? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Rika let go of my arm and took a step back. I think you just made contact with the archive. I think you accessed it without even knowing you were doing it. I shook my head, trying to clear the lingering fog. That doesn't make sense. I didn't do anything. That's the thing, Marcus. That's exactly why it worked. Because you weren't trying. Because you were just being human. Rika turned and started walking back toward the entrance. We need to get out of here. There's a lot we need to talk about, and we don't have much time. But what about the incursion, the alarm? It's already over, she said matter-of-factly. The archive protected itself. It always does. Whatever tried to get in, it's gone now. Or at least it's been neutralized. I followed her out of the chamber, my mind reeling with what had just happened. I felt like I'd stumbled into something much bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur of debriefings and tests. Every time I thought the questions would end, a new set of officers with new sets of credentials would show up to ask the same questions in slightly different ways. What did you see in the archive chamber? What did you feel? Did you hear any voices? Did you experience any unusual sensations? The only consistent thing about the interrogations was their complete lack of consistency. Each team seemed to be working from a different set of assumptions, and none of them seemed willing to share their findings with the others. I did my best to answer honestly, but the truth was that I didn't have many answers to give. I'd walked into a room, looked at a glowing orb, and felt nothing. No voices, no visions, no sudden bursts of ancient knowledge downloading into my brain. Just a weird feeling of being watched, and a buzzing sensation that faded as quickly as it had appeared. I'm telling you, I said to Rika during one of our brief moments alone, I have no idea what happened in there. The archive might have responded to something, but it wasn't me. I was just standing there trying not to say anything stupid. That's exactly my point, Rika replied. You weren't trying. Every other species that's attempted to access the archive has come in with some kind of agenda. They wanted something: power, knowledge, control. The archive recognized that and it resisted them. But you were just curious, open, human. Are you saying that being human is special? I'm saying it's different. Human consciousness works differently from other species. We don't always realize it because we've never had a proper comparison. But the evidence is mounting. The archive isn't interested in what other species think. It's interested in what we feel, our emotions, our memories, our experiences. The lights flickered again, and I noticed the way Rika tensed when it happened. She was still keeping secrets from me, still holding back information that she thought I wasn't ready to hear. But the incident at the archive had changed something between us. We had a shared secret now, something that bound us together even if we didn't fully understand it. "You're still not telling me everything," I said. "What else is going on here? What's really at stake?" Rika was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed and sat down on the edge of my bunk. "Something's been interfering with the academy for months," she said. "Subtle things at first. Equipment malfunctions, communication errors, the occasional power spike. Nothing that couldn't be explained as normal wear and tear. But the frequency has been increasing, and the pattern is too consistent to be coincidence." "What kind of pattern?" "The breaches always coincide with specific individuals. Those individuals who have been identified as having high levels of mental activity. Creative types, people who think differently, people like you." I stared at her. "You think I'm responsible for the breaches?" "No, I think you're a target. Something is trying to get through to you, to find a weakness in the way human minds work, and it's using the archive's proximity to amplify its efforts." "The archive is near my quarters." "The archive is everywhere under this planet's surface," Rika said. "The facility was built on top of it. The entire Xylos project exists to study it, and whatever is trying to get in is using your connection to it as a door." I felt cold. Not the cold of the environment, but the cold of realization. The device I'd found in my locker, the one I'd meant to report, suddenly took on a new significance. "There's something in my quarters," I said. "A device. It's small, black, no markings. I found it when I was unpacking." Rika's expression hardened. "Show me." We went to my quarters, and I opened the locker to show her the device. It was still there, still smooth and dark and featureless, clinging to the inside of the door like a leech. Rika studied it without touching it. "This is Veth technology, advanced Veth technology, the kind that's supposed to be restricted to their government." "Are you saying the Veth are trying to get into the archive?" "I'm saying the Veth have been monitoring this facility for years. They want what the archive holds, and they've been trying every method to access it. This device is designed to interface with a human mind, to read your thoughts and transmit them to a remote location." I felt violated. The idea that someone had been reading my thoughts, had been accessing the most private parts of my mind, made me want to tear the locker apart. "How long has it been there?" I asked. "We don't know. It could have been planted before you even arrived. But we do know that the Veth are planning something, something that involves you." "Me? Why me specifically?" Rika looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Because you're special, Marcus. I've already told you that. The fact that you access the archive without even trying is a significant indicator, but there's more to it than that." "More like what?" She took a breath, seeming to brace herself for what she was about to say. "Every human who's been able to interact with the archive in any meaningful way shares the same basic traits: open-mindedness, strong emotional connections, a willingness to be vulnerable. You hit every mark on the list." "I don't feel that special." "I know you don't. That's part of why you are." The lights flickered again, more intensely than before. This time they stayed dim, leaving us in a twilight that made the shadows seem to move. "The power system is being affected," Rika said. "That's not supposed to happen, not like this." We moved through the corridors, our footsteps echoing in the semi-darkness. Around us, the academy was descending into chaos. Cadets ran in every direction, officers shouted contradictory orders, and the emergency system seemed to be glitching, displaying conflicting information on every screen. Then the buzzing started again. The same sound I'd heard in the archive chamber. The same vibration that seemed to come from inside my own skull. Rika noticed my reaction. "It's affecting you, isn't it?" I nodded, unable to form words. The buzzing was getting louder, and the shadows were beginning to take on shapes that didn't quite make sense. They were moving independently of their sources, sliding across walls and floors in patterns that seemed designed to confuse. "Stay focused," Rika said. "Whatever happens, don't let it inside your head." "Inside my head." "Your thoughts, Marcus. The archive responds to your thoughts, and whatever is interfering with the archive is trying to use that connection to get inside you." The buzzing became a voice, soft and gentle, like my mother's voice when she was trying to calm me down after a nightmare. It was telling me things, whispering secrets that I couldn't quite make out, words in a language I felt I should understand but didn't. "Don't listen," Rika said. "Block it out, think about something else, anything else." I tried to think about my family, about my mother's cooking, my father's laugh, my sister's ridiculous antics. But the voice was there, always just beneath the surface of my consciousness, waiting for a moment of weakness. Then something shifted. The shadows stopped moving and the buzzing faded to a low hum. The lights came back on, brighter than before, and the chaos around us slowly began to subside. "What happened?" I asked. "I don't know, but I think we need to talk to the commandant. There's something larger going on here, and I think you're at the center of it." Commandant Ventura's office was located at the very top of the Academy's main tower, a circular room with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a panoramic view of the surrounding landscape. The lighting was soft and warm, designed to make visitors feel at ease, but the commandant himself had a presence that made ease impossible. He was a tall man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. His uniform was immaculate, his posture perfect, his expression carefully neutral. "Lieutenant Tanaka, Cadet Jackson, please sit down." Rika and I took the seats facing his desk. The chairs were comfortable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sitting in judgment. "The investigation into the incident at the archive has yielded some interesting results," Ventura said. "Initial analysis suggests a significant energy surge, originating from the planet's core. That surge appears to have interacted with Cadet Jackson's neural patterns in a way that we don't fully understand." "With all due respect, Commandant," I said, "I don't understand any of this. I'm just a cadet. I haven't been here long enough to cause any kind of energy surge." Ventura studied me for a long moment. "You've been here long enough to make contact with the archive. That's something that most humans never achieve, something that no non-human species has ever achieved." "I didn't achieve anything. I was just standing there." "That's precisely what makes you so interesting." Ventura leaned forward, his eyes locked onto mine. "You see, Cadet Jackson, we've been studying the Xylos archive for decades. We've tested every method we could think of to access it. We've tried scanning, probing, and even direct neural interfaces. Nothing worked. The archive simply didn't respond to any of our attempts. Until I showed up. Until you showed up. With no training, no special equipment, and no knowledge of what you were doing. You accessed the archive because you were simply being yourself, because your mind operates in a way that the archive recognizes as compatible." "But how? What's so special about the way I think?" Ventura glanced at Rika. "Lieutenant Tanaka has been working on a theory about that. Perhaps she'd like to share it." Rika nodded. "The Veth have been trying to access the archive through technological means, the Cathari through biological means, the Meridians through chemical means. None of them have been successful because they've all been trying to force their way in. They see the archive as a locked door that needs to be opened." "But it's not a door," I said, the realization dawning on me. "It's something else." "It's a filter," Rika agreed. "The archive doesn't protect itself through locks and barriers. It protects itself through recognition. It responds to a specific type of consciousness, a type of consciousness that seems to be unique to humans." "And that type of consciousness is what exactly?" Rika took a breath. "One that doesn't try to control the archive, one that's open and receptive and willing to just Experience. That's what you did, Marcus. You didn't try to take anything. You didn't try to force anything. You were just there being you. I thought about that for a moment. It sounded too simple, too easy. So the other species couldn't access the archive because they were trying too hard. Essentially, yes, they had agendas. They wanted something. You didn't want anything. That was the difference. Ventura spoke up. Which brings us to the current situation. The Veth have been working on alternative methods of accessing the archive. Their recent activities suggest they've discovered something significant about the human mind, something that makes certain individuals ideal candidates for their experiments. Experiments. Observational studies, Ventura corrected. The Veth have been monitoring human thought patterns for years. They're trying to understand what makes us different, what gives us access to the archive while they're locked out. I remembered the device in my locker. The thing I found, it was Veth technology. Ventura nodded. It was a thought-reading device, designed to analyze your neural patterns and transmit them to a remote location. We believe they've been using these devices to collect data on human consciousness. I felt a chill run down my spine. They've been monitoring us, all of us. Yes, and they've learned a great deal about how human minds work, which is why we need to be careful. They're working on something new, something that could change the balance of power in this sector. Rika leaned forward. The Veth have been developing a weapon, something designed specifically to interfere with human consciousness. I stared at her. A weapon that affects how people think. Not just how they think, how they process information, how they make decisions, how they experience reality. They've been analyzing human neural patterns for years, and they've finally developed a way to replicate and manipulate those patterns at a distance. I tried to understand the implications. The idea of having my thoughts manipulated, of having my perception of reality twisted and reshaped by an alien intelligence, was terrifying. But there was also something else, something that didn't quite fit. If the Veth can control human thought, I said, then why haven't they just done it? Why all the espionage and the monitoring and the secret experiments? Rika smiled grimly. Because it doesn't work. The weapon they developed, the one designed to interfere with human consciousness, it failed. Spectacularly. It was tested on a group of human prisoners in a Veth facility, and nothing happened. Nothing. Nothing. The Veth expected the prisoners to become confused, disoriented, suggestible. Instead, the subjects were completely unaffected. As far as anyone could tell, nothing had changed. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. So it doesn't work. Not the way they intended. But that's where things get interesting. The Veth didn't just abandon the project. They escalated it. They've been sending teams to Earth and other human colonies, collecting data on as many human minds as possible. They're convinced that there's something they're missing, something about the way humans think that makes them resistant to their methods. Resistant. That's the word that's been floating around the intelligence community, Rika said. The Veth have been using the term resistant to describe human consciousness. It seems that the weapon they developed is less effective than they expected because human minds are fundamentally different from what they assumed. I didn't have any personal experience with the weapons the Veth had developed, but the description matched what I'd felt when I'd encountered the archive. A sense of resistance, a feeling that something inside me was capable of pushing back against attempts to influence it. Maybe it's not resistance, I said. Maybe it's just that we don't notice. What do you mean? Think about it, I said. All the weird things that have been happening at the academy, the lights flickering, the glitches in the system, the voices I heard. The archive responded to me because I wasn't trying. What if the Veth's weapon failed because the subjects didn't even notice it was happening? Rika stared at me. You're saying the Veth's weapon didn't work because humans didn't pay attention to it? I nodded. It makes sense, doesn't it? The Veth are trying to control human minds. They assume that if they target the right brain patterns, they can influence our thoughts. But what if human consciousness doesn't work that way? What if the reason we don't respond to their attempts is that we don't even notice them? I continued, getting more excited as the idea developed. The Veth think they've figured out how human minds work, but they don't understand the most basic thing about us. We're chaotic, we're distracted, we're always jumping from one thought to the next. We don't follow a single path. Our minds are like a crowded room full of people, all talking at once. If someone speaks a command in the middle of that chaos, no one even hears it. Commandant Ventura was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. That's a remarkably insightful observation, Cadet Jackson. It aligns with some of the theories that have been circulating about human cognitive patterns. Rika leaned back in her chair. So the Veth's plan doesn't work because humans are too distracted to be controlled. The Veth are trying to target our consciousness at a very specific level, I said. But consciousness isn't the only thing going on in our heads. There are all these other thoughts, memories, feelings, instincts. It's like shouting orders at a crowd of people who are all arguing with each other. Even if you shout loudly enough to be heard, no one's going to listen because they're too busy with their own arguments. Ventura looked at me with an expression of intense interest. And what about your experience with the archive? How does that fit into your theory? I thought about it. The archive is different. It didn't try to control me. It just reached out. And because it wasn't forcing anything, because it wasn't trying to override my natural thought processes, I was able to respond without even trying. The archive understood that human consciousness works through cooperation, not domination. A surprising analysis for a cadet, Ventura said. I just think about things, I replied. I don't have the training of a scientist or a military strategist. I'm just someone who's trying to understand what's happening to me. Which is exactly the kind of person the archive responds to, Rika said. A person who thinks without trying to control. A person who's willing to be open to new ideas. A person who's aware of their own limitations. I felt a warmth in my chest. Not a literal warmth, but a feeling of validation. Like I'd finally been recognized for something that mattered. So what happens now? I asked. Now, Ventura said. Now we prepare. The Veth haven't given up on their efforts. They're going to keep trying to access the archive, and they're going to keep trying to understand what makes humans different. And when they finally crack the code, they're going to try something bigger. Rika nodded. The archive is the key. If the Veth can access it, they can access the most ancient knowledge in the galaxy, the kind of knowledge that could reshape civilization. So we need to protect it, I said. We need to protect it, Ventura agreed. And we need to protect the people who can access it, people like you, Cadet Jackson. I left the commandant's office with Rika. My head was spinning with everything I'd learned. So what do we do now? I asked. We just wait for the Veth to make their next move. We don't have to wait, Rika said. We can make our own moves. The first step is understanding what the Veth are doing. We need to get inside their heads. How? By being human, Rika smiled. By being the one thing they can't control, by being exactly who we are. The days passed into weeks. My training continued, but my routine had been altered by everything that had happened. I was being watched now, monitored by people I didn't even know. My interactions with the archive were being studied, analyzed, and debated by experts. But I tried not to think about that. Instead, I focused on the work I was doing, the training I was receiving, the connections I was making with my fellow cadets. I discovered that there were others like me, people who'd experienced similar events, people who'd felt the archive's presence even if they'd never entered its chamber. The Veth's plans were constantly shifting. It seemed that the alien species was always adapting, always trying new approaches to solve the mystery of why humans could access the archive and they couldn't. One evening, after a long training session, I found myself alone with Rika on the observation deck where we'd first spoken. "Marvin," she said. "Marvin, I've been thinking about what you said, about how you didn't even realize you were resisting the Veth's influence." I nodded. "I still don't really understand it. I just do what I do." "I get it," she said. "You just live your life. You're open and present and aware of yourself. You can't fake that. It comes from who you are." I watched the stars wheel overhead, feeling the majesty of the universe pressing down on me. "So what do I do now?" "Now you keep being who you are," Rika said. "You keep being open and present and aware of yourself. And if the Veth try anything, you'll just let it slide off you like water off a stone. Because I'm too human to notice." "Because you're too human to notice," she agreed. "And that's the most powerful thing you can be." The alarm went off at 200. I was already awake, having not been able to fall asleep after the earlier events. My body was tired, but my mind was too keyed up to rest. I'd been through the Veth's attempts to access my mind, had felt the pressure of their influence, and had somehow come out on the other side. When I reached the operations center, Rika was already there. She looked tense, but there was also a hint of excitement in her eyes. "We've detected a Veth force approaching the facility," she said. "They're moving fast and they're not trying to hide. They're coming here right now." "They're coming to the academy," Rika confirmed. "And they're not looking for just the archive. They're looking for you." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "For me?" "They've identified you as someone who's accessed the archive, someone who might be able to show them how to do it." The cold knot tightened. "They want me. They want you to help them get into the archive, to show them the way." "And if I refuse?" Rika's expression was grim. "Then they'll try to take what they want by force, and that's why I need you to come with me." We moved through the corridors, heading toward the archive chamber. The facility was chaotic, with personnel running in every direction. There was an energy in the air, a sense that something huge was about to happen. When we reached the archive, I looked at the shimmering surface. "This is the source of it all. This is what the Veth are trying to access." "They want what you have," Rika said. "The ability to touch the archive without breaking it. They don't realize it's not something you can take. It's something you have to earn." Suddenly I felt a presence. Not threatening but watchful. The archive had noticed me. "It's responding," I said, "but I'm not sure why." "Maybe it's because you're here at the right moment," Rika said. "Maybe it recognizes that you're the one who's going to protect it." I didn't know if that was true, but the presence I felt was more than just an idea. It was a current, a flow of potential, all centered on the archive. I stepped forward, drawn by something deeper than conscious thought. The archive responded, and I felt a connection form, a bond of understanding. "Hello," I said. In response, the archive showed me a vision. A view of the academy from outside, the facility surrounded by Veth forces. I saw them approaching, saw their weapons ready. "They're going to attack," I said. "They're going to attack the facility." "But you can stop them," Rika said. "You can show them that their efforts won't work." I wasn't sure how to do that, but the archive was giving me something, teaching me something about how to interact with the alien forces. "It wants me to show them that they can't force their way in," I said. "It wants me to demonstrate the power of patience and understanding." "Then do it," Rika said. I closed my eyes and reached out with my mind. I didn't try to control anything. I just opened myself to the archive, let it flow through me. And the Veth forces stopped. Their weapons lowered, their movement slowed. They were standing still, waiting, uncertain. "What's happening?" Rika asked. "The archive is showing them," I said. "It's showing them what they've been missing. It's not about force. It's about connection. It's about understanding that the true power of the universe isn't something you can take." The Veth forces retreated. They didn't run. They just left, walking back to their ships with a sense of purpose that was almost peaceful. I opened my eyes. Rika was staring at me with a mixture of awe and respect. Marcus, you changed something out there, not just the situation, but the Veth themselves. I just showed them what I've been shown, I said, that the archive isn't something to be conquered, it's something to be understood. And now we keep doing what we've been doing. We be human. We think without trying to control. We're open to new ideas and willing to learn from our mistakes. Rika nodded. Then I think we can do that. The Veth forces didn't return. They had retreated and the academy was quiet again, but the experience had changed me. You know, I said to Rika, the Veth thought they could control human minds, but they didn't realize that we're not something to be controlled. We're something to be understood, and when you understand us, there's no reason to control us. That's a valuable lesson, she said, one I think the galaxy could learn. We stood on the observation deck, watching the stars. I was a different person than the cadet who'd first arrived at the academy. I had grown, learned, and changed. I think the Veth's plan failed because they were trying to do the impossible, I said. You can't control something that doesn't follow a pattern, and humans don't follow a pattern. That's what makes us special, Rika agreed. Our chaos, our unpredictability, our ability to just be. So what happens now? Now we learn from this, she said. We use it to build a better future, one where we're not trying to control each other, one where we're trying to understand each other. The Veth didn't have to be our enemies. No, Rika said. They didn't, but they chose to be because they didn't understand that what they were looking for couldn't be taken. It could only be given. I thought about that for a long moment. I think the galaxy's been looking for answers in the wrong places. They've been looking for something to control when what they should have been looking for is something to connect with. Maybe that's what the archive was trying to tell us, Rika said. Maybe the whole point is not about being special or powerful or important. Maybe it's about being human. I can do that, I said. That's the one thing I know how to do. Rika smiled. Then that's the one thing that matters. We stood on the observation deck, watching the stars, united in our shared humanity. The Veth had tried to control a human mind, and they had failed. But I had learned something more valuable than any secret the archive could have given me. We didn't need to be special. We didn't need to be powerful. We didn't need to be important. We just needed to be ourselves. The chaos of human thought, the unpredictability, the ability to just live our lives without trying to force anything, that was the key to the archive. That was the key to the galaxy. And it was the one thing that could never be taken away from us. The lights on the observation deck flickered once, then steadied. It was just a power fluctuation, a normal occurrence in a facility as old as the academy. But it reminded me of the earlier disturbances, the Veth's attempts to interfere with our consciousness. How did you feel when the Veth tried to control you? Rika asked. Honestly, I shrugged. I barely even noticed.